Hello everyone, this is my 16th devlog for my sand surfing roguelike game Dune. This week I worked on finishing up the Badlands region with the addition of the region boss, the Driller. To start, I needed to add a region for the Driller to spawn in, as well as locations for merchants to spawn as well, as they are vital to the game's progression. For the merchants, I simply created a cell where the mesa does not spawn, and I used older terrain generation for it. This makes the merchants stand out quite a lot within the canyons. For the boss arena, however, I wanted something a little different. The bosses will spawn in quarries, which are valleys that are isolated within the canyons. It took me a while to get the formula just right, but I ended up with mesas that have an opening in the middle and a few entrances into the arena. I wanted to minimize the number of entrances so that you couldn't easily run away from the boss, and getting into the boss arena required a short trip around the cell to locate the entrance, potentially causing you to run into some bandits. This also makes it so that bandits won't easily interfere with the fight. Onto the boss itself, the Driller is a worm boss. However, it took me a while to figure out exactly how you would defeat this boss. I knew I wanted weak points along the body that you would have to hit as it wiggles past you. But my idea for the boss was to have a giant drilling machine, and an object that is completely made of steel wouldn't have any obvious weak points like the sails from all the previous bosses. In the end, I decided to ditch the giant steel digging machine aesthetic in favor of a worm cyborg. I simply took a normal worm and slapped some drilling devices onto it. This would also cause it to have some exposed fleshy bits where I would put these warts, a byproduct of using the cybernetic enhancements the worm has, that the player could then hit to cause pain to the boss. I think that this aesthetically turned out okay, but it needs some slight changes due to the way that worms move. Most notably, whenever the boss turns rather sharply, the attachments don't seem to remain connected to the boss due to how distorted the base worm mesh becomes. I will either have to change how the worms behave when turning to prevent this graphical issue, or I will have to distort the augmentations and attachments with the worm. With the visuals done, I began work on the AI itself. The Driller behaves much like a typical worm, except that it doesn't give up, and at the moment it does not accelerate to keep up with the player. This is to make it so that the player can maneuver around the boss. However, their base speed is significant enough that the player will have difficulty doing this, especially within the confined space it is designed for. The boss performs hit and runs similar to the Phoenix, and has two different attack types. that it chooses randomly from once it retreats from the player. It either performs a leap attack, where it simply pounces at the player like a normal worm, or it performs a slither, where it breaches the surface and then crawls towards the player in a sine wave pattern, which is designed to confuse the player, as it makes for unpredictable movements. I found the Phoenix's dive pattern to be rather simple to avoid, so having a non-linear movement towards the player should make it more interesting. Ideally, the player is to hit the warts on the driller while it is performing a slither attack. Though with perfect timing, it is possible to hit them while they are pouncing on the player. Once all 6 weak points are destroyed, the driller will drop the 3 crates and the health upgrade that the Phoenix does, and will also drop the auger item that was added in a previous devlog. The auger gives a base acceleration to the player's board, allowing you to gain speed while sailing against the wind. This concludes all of the features I had planned for this region. The next region is the Windy Expanse, where I will reintroduce the missile boats, as well as a few larger barge types. This region should be fairly quick to implement, as it doesn't include any new terrain generation, or very much in terms of new features. The Windy Expanse will have no boneyards, but will have a lot more merchants than usual. However, all of the enemies will be significantly larger. The missile boat will be the smallest of these new barges. The new region will also include a notoriety mechanic, unique to that region. For each boat that you fight in the Windy Expanse, you get closer to summoning the boss. Unlike previous bosses, this boss will chase after you no matter where you are. I will give more details about the new boss in the coming weeks. For the next devlog, I want to reintroduce the missile boat and get started on the new region by fixing the current issues with the terrain generation. As you can see in the footage, a lot of the canyons result in dead ends, and there are numerous weird cliffs and drop-offs where the cells intersect, and this is a big issue when it comes to large open desert areas where this problem will be much more noticeable. That's all I have for this devlog. So, until next week, goodbye.